Hi, Medical Wildcats. I'm Joseph Guggenheim. I'm a 1972 alum of the medical school, and the title of this month's presentation is Chicago Pizza Redux. It's only appropriate that we do this in November because November 12th is National Pizza with the Works Except Anchovies Day. So settle back and have a slice of pizza, and let's talk about it for a while. In the year 2020, I did a presentation on the history of Chicago pizza, and it's now archived on the Medical Alumni Association website. And it includes such things as the evolution of Chicago's deep dish pizza, what makes their pizza unique, and the recommendations for the best pizzeria in Chicago, most of them near Northwestern's Chicago campus. There are several personalities involved, like Sewell, Rick Ricardo, and members of the Malnati family. There are many pizzerias around Chicago that sell deep dish. There are over 70 Lou Malnatis in the United States. It's estimated that there have been more than 80 Unos around the United States, 11 Geno's East in the United States, and Pisano's has 5 in Illinois alone. This picture on the right shows the anatomy of a typical Chicago pizza. You see the crust on the bottom, and it's not really as thick as some people think. After that's the cheese and the other toppings, such as sausage or vegetables, and then the tomato sauce is on top. There's also a lip of crust on the back edge of the pizza. There are more than 80,000 pizza restaurants in the United States, and in a recent year, their total sales reached almost $47 billion. Americans eat an average of 100 acres of pizza daily. About 70% of the viewers that watch the Super Bowl order pizza. It's the day with the largest sale. 93% of Americans eat pizza at least once a week. It's been estimated that they eat 23 to 38 pounds of pizza per year. My opinion is that there's such a wide range in this estimate that it's due to some people just throwing the back of the crust out. The industry has its own professional journal, Pizza Today. There's been a fresco unearthed at Pompeii following the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD that shows what may be a pizza on a very shallow pan. If you look at this picture carefully, I think there's a gray dog on the right side of the picture in the foreground with his front paws on the pan, and behind that in the right background, a gray cat. So perhaps this is a advertisement for the first pet food. In 1894, a pizzeria was opened in New York City on Mulberry Street, and other pizzerias followed later in the Midwest where there was a plentiful supply of cheese. In 1924, Tom Granado opened a pizzeria on Taylor Street in Chicago's near West Side. It closed in 1961. During the 1930 Depression years and the 1940 war years, Americans ate a lot of casseroles, one-dish items. During the war years, the more you could pile on a pizza crust, the better to satisfy the stomach and not cost many ration coupons. There are various kinds of pizza across the United States, and every region has its own. In New York City, the typical pizza is round, thin crust, and wedge-shaped, and rather malleable, so you can fold it in a bivalve configuration, so you don't lose your topping. Huge wedges are sold with tomato sauce on top. The pizzas are usually at least 18 inches in diameter. And New Yorkers claim that the municipal water supply is the secret to the delicious flavor. In Philadelphia, the crust is thin and crispy, and this allows the slice to be piled with toppings. The dough is stretched thin for quick and even baking, and the sauce is less tangy than New York or Chicago pizza. It's usually mozzarella with provolone, Parmesan, or cheddar blended in to make a sharper flavor. The typical Detroit pizza is rectangular in shape. It has a thick, spongy crust, and one of the characteristics is the edge of the crust is caramelized cheese, usually Wisconsin brick. This forms at the high baking temperatures. The legend is that the rectangular pans were originally oil drip pans and trays for small industrial parts. The pizzas are assembled in a so-called upside down pattern with the crust followed by the toppings, followed by the cheese, followed by the tomato sauce on top. The dough is twice stretched. In New Haven, Connecticut, the pizza is often called a pizza. It has a thin, chewy crust and an irregular shape, neither circular nor rectangular. The New Haven natives often put clams on their pizza. And here's Chicago, or Chicago style pizza. It's a thick, sweet pastry crust, leavened with yeast, piled high with toppings. Sausage is the best seller overall. There's a long cooking time, 45 to 50 minutes at high temperature, about 600 degrees Fahrenheit. And this allows the patrons to consume vast quantities of Chianti or Lambrusco while waiting for their pizza. This is a picture from Bartoli's. Some cooks put cornmeal on the bottom of the pan in order to insulate the pizza and keep the crust from burning. The pan is coated with olive oil to fry the dough in the oven. And the pizza, as I said, is assembled upside down with the tomato sauce on top, unlike the traditional pizza where the tomato sauce goes directly on the crust dough. It's also known as pan pizza, pizza in a pan, and deep dish pizza. The name deep dish pizza is attributed to a 1971 article in the Northwestern University student newspaper, although the term pizza in a pan had been used for years. There are other kinds of Chicago pizza. There's a stuffed pizza with an extra layer of crust on top and sometimes cheese incorporated into the edge of the crust. Tavern-style pizza has a very thin crust like saltine cracker and is traditionally cut in squares. It's designed to be accompanied with alcoholic beverages. And then the traditional or so-called thin crust pizza that you can buy in franchises throughout the United States and in grocery store freezers, you need to pick carefully because a lot of them are not worth the calories. So who invented Chicago-style pizza? Well, 5 years ago in 2020, I think I knew, and I included that in my presentation. But since then, research has shown that perhaps that was wrong. Let's look at the legend of Chicago pizza. All the authorities agree that in 1943 was when the pizzeria that had deep dish pizza started. In 1943, Prohibition had been repealed, and Ike Sewell, who was a former University of Texas football player and Texas native and liquor salesman, wanted to open a restaurant. That's probably not true. Rick Ricardo, whose birth name was Richard Novaretti, was an Italian immigrant and Chicago restaurateur. He teamed up with Sewell. Ricardo had experience in the hospitality business with a restaurant on Rush Street. That's probably true. He did have a restaurant. Sewell wanted Tex-Mex food to remind him of South Texas cuisine. Someone cooked a Tex-Mex dinner to serve to Ricardo and investors. Questionable. Ricardo became violently ill after eating the Tex-Mex food. He returned to Italy to recover. Later, he returned to Chicago and recommended that he and Sewell open a pizza restaurant. Probably not true. Sewell argued that pizza was not a hearty meal. Only one Chicago restaurant was serving pizza, and that was on Taylor Street, as I mentioned before. And the owner said they made pizza only for special occasions. Perhaps true. A larger and thicker pizza was baked under Ricardo's supervision. Sewell and Ricardo agreed to serve pizza in a pan at their new restaurant on 29 East Ohio Street, where they rented space, and that is now still the home of Pizzeria Uno. Let's look at what the research has shown that the truth is. Sewell and Ricardo rented space in an old mansion. I'm sorry, this is still the legend. At a mansion, a four-story mansion on Ohio Street that was formerly owned by lumber baron Nathan Mills. Probably not true. Rudy Malnati was hired as bartender and manager. Probably not true. Sewell stood outside on the street corner handing out samples to passersby. That's questionable. Now let's look at the true story. The Malnati family maintained that Rudy Malnati Sr., and Rick Ricardo, not Sewell, were the ones that handed out the samples to passersby. Well, that's a minor point. Ricardo died in 1954. Rudy Malnati Sr. died in 1974, and Sewell lived till 1990. So Sewell had many more years to tell his version of the story to the media until he died in 1990. So who really invented deep dish pizza? Was it Sewell, Ricardo, or Malnati? Recently, Tim Samuelson, who is Chicago's official cultural historian, and Peter Regas, who is a financial statistician by day and a pizza historian by night, have investigated these claims to see what is really correct. Italy was involved in World War II in 1943, so Ricardo could not have possibly returned to Italy after eating the Tex-Mex food unless he was invading the country as a member of the U.S. Armed Forces. There were no records he participated in the U.S. Armed Forces. Ricardo was a established Chicago restaurateur, and his place on Rush Street was frequented by visiting celebrities and actors and actresses. Ricardo and his family moved into 29 East Ohio Street, which is the site of Pizzeria Uno, in late 1942. Remember, the pizza was invented in 43. Before the opening of the pizzeria, renting a floor in a mansion previously owned by Nathan Mears. So Rick Ricardo moved his family in there for a residence. Between 1940 and 41, the abandoned basement space had been occupied by a restaurant, the Pelican Tap, which was a restaurant and tavern, which they left their pans and ovens. You can see on the right the advertisement for the Pelican, and it says the Pelican specializing in pizza in the upper left corner. And here's a menu from the Pelican. You can see the prices were a little different then. Small pizzas were 50 cents and large pizzas were $1. Ricardo decided to open his own pizzeria on this site and keep his family in a residence there. He did not want the Pelican to reopen because there had been a murder there, and he did not want a lot of noisy reveling in a tavern. And here you can see the Pelican's menu blown up a little. Small pizza, 50 cents, large pizza, $1, club steak, 75 cents. The Pelican had abandoned their basement tavern and left their pizza pans. And later, Ricardo's ex-wife called Chicago Magazine and said Ike Sewell didn't know beans about deep dish pizza. She said he wasn't even present when Ricardo hatched the idea for deep dish pizza. She said the wartime liquor shortage caused them to form a partnership, and Sewell was in the liquor business, and he had money. So he was a businessman with money in the liquor business, which is just what they needed. The Malnati family asserted Sewell came along after the pizzeria had opened in 43. Samuelson and Regas inspected all the liquor licenses issued between 1939 and 1945 for 29 East Ohio, and it showed that Ricardo had signed one on November 1943, which said he had no partners. This contradicts Sewell's story that Sewell and Ricardo together leased a space in 1943 to establish a pizzeria. Ricardo and Sewell signed a partnership and agreement in 1944, but again, this was after the pizzeria had opened in 43. In reality, Sewell's wife signed it. He did not sign it because it would have looked like a conflict of interest for a man in the liquor business to be signing as a partner in the pizzeria. Tom Granado had opened the first pizzeria in Chicago on Taylor Street in the 1920s, and at age 92, his daughter told Regas and Samuelson that Sewell's story is absolutely not true. If Ricardo had opened a pizzeria in 1943, which he did, then the recipe was probably the sole creation of Ricardo because he was the sole investor in the pizzeria. The restaurant opened as the Pizzeria and then changed the name to the Pizzeria Ricardo and finally Pizzeria Uno. Bartolomeo Fico was Ricardo's cousin, and he was the first manager from 43 until 45. Ricardo was busy with his other restaurant on Rush Street, so he thought that he could trust his cousin to run the business for a couple of years. In 1951, a Chicago Tribune article named the bartender Rudy Malnati Sr., who was an Italian immigrant, as the new manager. And this was the first time that Malnati had been mentioned in the media. The Malnati family claimed that it was Rudy Sr., not Sewell, who stood outside handing out samples to the passersby. Rudy Sr. maintained that it was his idea that fueled the invention of deep dish pizza, not Ricardo or Sewell. And this is allegedly the first menu from Pizzeria Uno in 1957. In the upper left-hand corner under cocktails, you can see that Fleischmann's Liquor was on the menu, and pizzas had gone up. By this time, their top pizza was $2.85. And according to the Malnati version, Ricardo died in 1954, and then Rudy Sr., shown here sitting with the glasses, and his son Lou, serving his pizza, became the co-managers. Lou was born in Italy, moved to Chicago, and then back to Italy, and finally settled in Chicago. Rudy Sr. and his son Lou co-managed the pizzeria until Rudy Sr. died in 74. And Lou was then told he was an employee like all the others. And if the Malnati's had invented deep dish pizza, their contribution to the restaurant was not acknowledged or rewarded. And frustrated, Lou decided to open his own pizzeria. He did this in Lincolnwood in the suburbs, and was told by experienced restaurateurs that a pizzeria in the suburbs would never succeed. He showed them. There are now more than 70 Lou Malnati's pizzerias. And Uno was so successful that Dewey opened in 619 North Wabash in October 1955. So this was about 12 years after Pizzeria Uno. And this was in another old mansion built by Nathan Mears. Uno did, in a recent year, did $3.2 million in business. Dewey did $3.4 million. So in that year, at least, Dewey was outdoing Uno. Gino's East, just around the corner from our med school, opened at 162 East Superior in 1966. This was allegedly the second oldest deep dish pizzeria in Chicago. Two cab drivers, Sam Levine and Fred Bartoli, wanted to try their hand in the pizza business. Well, they weren't really cab drivers. They were successful entrepreneurs who owned 4 cab companies. And pizzeria, or Gino's East, obviously did quite well. In 1966, Gino's East hired the Dewey cook, Alice May Redmond, and her sister, Ruth Hadley, to run their kitchen. From 1960 until 1966, Redmond had been dividing her time between Dewey and Gino's East. The Malnati's told her she had to make a decision and had to go to one and not split her time between the two, and she decided to stay at Gino's East. It's interesting that wherever Alice went, the business seemed to increase. When she went from Uno to Dewey, the Dewey's business increased. When she went from Dewey to Gino's East increased. She was an experienced cook from Mississippi and knew how to make biscuits. She added sugar, cream of tartar, and more oil to the Uno's dough recipe to make it more stretchable and improve the texture. In 1991, Rudy Sr.'s other son, Rudy Jr., opened Pisano's Pizzeria on North State Street. The rumor is that his mother, Donna Louise Mama Malnati, had the secret recipe from Uno to make the dough, and she made dough balls at night for Pisano's. Pisano's is still there on State Street, and it is very good and usually does not have the waiting that is present at the Lou Malnati's. Elsewhere in Chicago, other variations of deep dish pizza were developed. Pequod's induced a vertical crust of caramelized cheese around the circumference of their pizza in 1970. And you can see a picture here of the dark brown caramelized cheese. They started in Morton Grove and now have another restaurant in the Lincoln Park area. Efren and Joseph Bolio introduced their mother's Italian Easter pie, a thick pizza on Chicago's South Side in 1974. With this extra layer of crust, it became known as stuffed pizza. And there are many Giordano's around the Chicago area. And this shows the evolution of deep dish pizza in the Chicago area. You can see at the top that Uno's was first, and it begot Dewey and Lou Malnati's because Malnati worked at Uno, and Gino's Pizzeria begot Gino's East in 1966. I don't know anything about those in the middle, La Piazza and Brothers 2. They are no longer in existence. The one on the far right were Bert Katz's pizzerias, the Inferno, which was in Evanston, uh, introducing Evanston to the deep dish pizza. It's no longer there. Gulliver's opened in 1965 on Howard Street. I believe there's still a Gulliver's in the Chicago area, I think in Morton Grove. And Pequod's opened in 71. There are still at least 2 Pequods in the Chicago area. Starbucks opened in 1989. Starbucks Coffee sent them a cease and desist order because the name was too similar to Starbucks. So they changed it to Bert's Place. And there was still a Bert's Place in the Chicago area. In my opinion, there's no bad Chicago style pizza. Some just seems better than others. And I just wonder what everybody's favorite is. Everybody has their own favorite. I'd like to thank Peter Regas and Tim Samuelson, shown in this picture. Peter's in the blue shirt, Tim's in the dark shirt, and Jill Ricardo, Rick Ricardo's widow, is in the background in the picture. They're enjoying a pizza at Uno. And this is the time of the year where we give thanks, and I'd like to thank the team that helps make these presentations possible. There's Allison, who does the recordings and does the seamless editing to eliminate my mistakes. Jillian does her best to teach me how to speak and write the King's English. This year, we've been working on grammar. Last year, we were working on punctuation. And Katie, who works in the library, is a walking encyclopedia of everything Northwestern. If you ask her about something you think happened and she doesn't know the answer, it obviously never happened. And I'd like to thank you, my audience, for your interest in these presentations. And I hope they have brought back memories of your time in Chicago and at Northwestern. Have a happy Thanksgiving, and let's get together again virtually next month.